What's up, y'all? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Zoe, and today I'm talking about all of the books that I read in the month of October. I ended up reading 11 books in the month of October. 7 of those books I did read during the Spookathon, and 2 out of the 7 I actually did DNF, so I'm kind of counting them, kind of not. But if you're not counting them, then I did read 9 full books this month, and I'm really excited to talk about them, so let's just jump in. The first book that I read in the month of October was Pet Sematary. I did vlog myself reading this in the dark. It was quite the experience. I will link that video below if you want to check out my real in-time thoughts when I did read this. But this is a book by Stephen King, and it follows a family who is moving into this new town, this new house, and they end up moving into a house that actually is built on this pet cemetery where people bury their pets. But there's a lot more mystery behind the pet cemetery. There's some creepiness going on with his neighbors. That's all I kind of want to say about this. I definitely had some strong reactions about the ending. It scared the heck out of me. It was so scary. So worth it though. Overall, I mostly enjoyed my time reading this book. I read it in like 2 or 3 days. And this is the 3rd book by Stephen King I've ever read. I think I'm just not used to his writing style quite yet. It was very detailed. He took a long time to kind of build up this story. I was really expecting it to be scary from the beginning to the end. That wasn't necessarily the case, but by the time I got to the end, I realized how the entirety of the story was really crafted so well to support how scary the ending ended up being. So overall, I really thought it was well done. I did end up giving this a 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this, and I'm excited to read more Stephen King in the very near future. In the same vlog where I read Pet Sematary, I was also reading at the same time The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware, and I ended up loving this book. A lot of you already know what this is about because it's really popular right now, but this is a new adult mystery thriller. This follows our main character, Rowan, who just took a nannying position for this family. They have 4 daughters, and they also have this very creepy old house that they turned and restored into this smart house. And so everything is kind of controlled in the house by this app on her phone, and there's cameras everywhere. It's such an interesting setting. I loved reading about this smart old house. The story feels so paranormal when you're reading it, and oh my gosh, the pacing of this book was just insane. There are not a lot of mystery thrillers that I read where you're just going from beginning to end, and I loved that this book did this. I loved the way that Ruth Ware just weaves her stories and gives you little specks of details and like little tiny red herrings to throw you off. It was so good. This was a 5 out of 5 for me. I absolutely recommend it. It's one of my favorite thrillers of all time. It's so good. The next book that I read in the month of October was The Chalk Man by C.J. Tudor. So this is a book that follows a group of friends in the 1980s where there's a series of kind of mysterious things happening, mysterious murders. To communicate with one another, this group of friends draws chalk people around the neighborhood for their other friends to find and communicate to. So like someone will draw a chalk figure or chalk symbols by their other friend's house, and that friend will see it and they'll know that they're supposed to meet at like the playground. Well, they start receiving chalk men that aren't from anyone in the group. So someone is like mysteriously catching on to these chalkman drawings. At one point it ends up leading these friends to a murder, and the mystery kind of takes off from there. This is a dual timeline, so we're in the present when all of these kids are actually adults, and you start weaving together that there were like things that happened when they were kids, and the mystery kind of starts up again. The best way I can explain it honestly is it really felt like the story It by Stephen King. This group of friends, they end up going through something together, traumatizing in their childhoods, and then you flash forward to when they're adults and they kind of have to band together again to figure out the mystery. I really didn't end up enjoying this book that much. It was a lot more graphic than I was expecting it to be. I just want to say, like, hella trigger warnings for all kinds of things: abuse, rape, sexual assault, animal abuse, just lots of stuff that I was not prepared for. It was a little bit hard to get through at times. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention is that one of the characters is called Fat Gav, like the word fat and then the kid's last name, but he's called that from his other friend's perspective, the guy that we're following in this story. And I was also just bothered by that. And the kid's weight was like talked about a lot. And it was just unnecessary. I didn't love it. I was really put off by this story altogether. I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars. Another book that I read in the month of October was Serpent and Dove, and this is by Shelby Morin. This is another really popular book right now. It is a new adult fantasy that follows the story of a witch and a witch hunter. They end up needing to get married at one point kind of early on in the story, and this definitely causes some issues. The witch hunter is this guy. He's very like religious, and the witch herself is actually trying to escape her coven, but she's very like rambunctious and out there, and he's more like strict to the rules. What are you doing? And so they really clash in their relationship, especially after they're forced into this marriage. I can't give too many other details because you kind of have to read the book to know what happens. But this was another one that I just didn't really enjoy. It took me a long time to get through this. I had to pause it to read for Spookathon, but this is a 500-page fantasy book. So let me start off by saying that I am not much of a fantasy reader. So take everything that I say with a large grain of salt because I don't read fantasy a lot. I don't have a lot of other works of fantasy to compare it to, but I really loved the premise of this story and I thought it was going to be something that I enjoyed, but overall it was kind of lackluster for me. I loved the relationship between our two main characters, but everything about the world and the adventures that they went on and the political things that happened, they were a little boring, in my opinion, which sounds so bad. I don't really have any opinion about them. Honestly, I just wanted to read about like their relationship. It was definitely a well done, slow burn, enemies to lovers relationship, and I'm such a fan of those. But everything else that happened around them I didn't love, and I really had an issue with the ending. I was a little bothered with the fact that the male main character, who was religious his whole life, grew up in the church, had all these morals and beliefs and things that he really clung to for a long time. In the end, it's just like his character completely transformed. It was a totally different dude who just threw all of his beliefs and everything he clung to the wayside. He just completely abandoned his faith, seemingly at the end of the book. So it just bothered me a little bit because when you have a character that you're building up, he felt like a totally different character at the very end. This happened like right at the end of the book, so it's very possible that in the sequel, his character will flesh out more of those like moral struggles. I just wanted to see more of that. I wanted to see more evidence and more of why he all of a sudden was like, I don't care about any of this anymore. I don't know if I'm going to continue on in the series. I'm kind of torn. I might. I don't know. I guess I'll let you guys know. Overall, I ended up giving this one a 2.5 out of 5 stars. The first book that I read for Spookathon was An Anonymous Girl by Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen. This is an adult domestic mystery thriller. This story follows a girl who is trying to make more money, so she goes and she signs up to take this research type survey, and the survey ends up being a lot about like these morality questions. And she starts to realize that these morality questions are really like kind of deep, they're a little personal, and they're really kind of starting to make her think about different morality situations, and she's kind of really getting in deep with this research survey. That's all I want to say about it because there's so much that is just sprinkled throughout the book that is revealed, and it's done so well. We find out who's really putting on the survey, what the reasoning for the survey really is. It's a little bit more sinister than she originally thinks, and she gets in pretty deep with the person that's putting on this survey. I really enjoyed this. I'm a fan of domestic mystery thrillers if they're done well. If they're not done well, it makes me want to like never read the genre again. I listened to the audiobook and I really enjoyed it because there were 2 different voice actors, and the one that was the person putting on the research survey was a very calculated, computerized kind of voice, and it just really fit that character's persona. I loved it. The ending was crazy. I kept going back and forth with who did it? I don't know what's going on. I did really enjoy this. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I tried to read during Spookathon was one of the books that I actually ended up DNFing, and that was The Grip of It by Jack Jemick. This is a book that follows the story of a husband and wife who move into a new house, and the house ends up being haunted. That's pretty much it. I really struggled with this book for a couple reasons. One, the chapters were told from alternating perspectives. So the first chapter would be told from the wife's perspective, and the second one would be told from the husband's perspective. However, the author didn't include whose perspective you were reading from. So when you jumped into a new chapter, you had to kind of remember like who you were reading from, pick up on context clues as to who was talking. And it just got really frustrating for me. I don't like when you do alternate perspectives and you don't include who's talking. It just makes it more difficult for the reader to catch on, and sometimes you think it's from someone and it's not, and you're just like, wait, I don't know if that was intentional to kind of throw the reader off and make them feel more confused, but that was not enjoyable. Also, I just really didn't love this couple's dynamic and their relationship. It was really frustrating, and it's not that I have to enjoy a couple's relationship or even like characters in order to enjoy a book, but just the things in their relationship that they were doing didn't seem believable by any means. They weren't communicating. Really scary things would happen to them at night, and they wouldn't talk to each other about it. Like, they would just go back to bed. And even if you don't like your spouse or you have issues, like if something terrifying happens to you in the middle of the night, don't you think you would wake up your spouse and be like, hey, this happened, did you hear that, are you scared? It was so weird. And then there was some weird stuff thrown in there with their neighbor, and he goes missing, and then they try to find him, and at that point the book lost me. I didn't care about the neighbor. I stopped caring about the mystery of the house. It just became really repetitive, and I really ended up not liking this book. So I ended up DNFing this one about halfway through. The next book that I read for Spookathon was Uzumaki by Junji Ito, and this is a horror manga. It is so big, it's hardcover. It is a beast of a book. This was wild. It's so funny. When I was editing my vlog, I used the word weird so many times, but you guys, that is the only word that I can think of to actually describe this book. It is so weird. Very bizarre, really out there, just crazy. The things that happen in this book obviously would never happen in real life, but yeah, very, very bizarre, and I loved it. I really liked it. There's not much to say about the synopsis. It's about this town that's being overrun by these spirals that are kind of like making these people obsessed, and then because of the obsession, they're dying. It's very like Twilight Zone. Like, for the first half of the book, each chapter is pretty unique in showing how the spirals affect different people across the town. Seemingly, it didn't really like all coincide, and I was like, okay, are we gonna find out the history of the spirals? Is there gonna be something that happens? We were following like the same character and through her perspective what was happening, but it just didn't seem like it all was building up to a story. And then when the second half of the book kind of started, that's when the story really started like fleshing itself out. I really enjoyed the first half more. I liked seeing the way that the spirals were causing this mayhem in this town. I thought that like the story overall about the spirals, and then kind of like the adventure they had to go on to try and fix the spirals or whatever, was just, it was okay, it was fine. But yeah, the first half of this book was super intriguing. The book in general was just so out there and bizarre. It was really entertaining though, and I do recommend it if you enjoy manga, if you enjoy like darker manga. It'll definitely keep you entertained. I ended up giving this one a 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read for the Spookathon was The Butterfly Garden. This is by Dot Hutchinson, and I really, really liked this book a lot. So this book follows the story of a father and a son who kidnap girls around the age of 16 and take them back to their greenhouse butterfly type garden and basically do whatever they want with them. When the girls reach the age of 21, they kill the girls, embalm them, and like preserve them in resin and keep them behind this glass in this hallway to kind of like present them. It's so messed up. Like, it's a very, very dark book. What I liked about it is that it's told from the perspective of a survivor. So right at the beginning of the story, we're put into the setting of this kind of interrogation room where one of the survivors is talking to the FBI, and she's telling her story about how she was kidnapped, what happened, and then how they escaped. So you know that from the beginning that a handful of girls did escape, which kind of gives you as a reader a sense of relief just knowing that they did escape and they're not still there. However, she does tell her story from like beginning to end. And so you're kind of flashing back and forward to her being in the interrogation room with the FBI and then what actually happened and just stringing all of these things together. I will say that I also really appreciated that this story wasn't really graphic. Although it's a very intense and dark read, the author was very tasteful about the way that she wrote the book. She tells you just enough to kind of let you fill in the blanks as a reader. I really appreciated that. It's not on the level of like Karen Slaughter Pretty Girls. The only thing that kind of ruined it for me, I don't want to say ruined it, I still really liked the book, but what really detracted from me giving this a full 5 stars was the ending. The ending felt really rushed, really forced. There was a twist at the ending that was totally unnecessary and actually ended up ruining it for me. I loved everything about the story except for the really unnecessary twist at the end. It was so cheesy. It just didn't need it. Like, I was surprised that the author even included it because the book was totally fine by itself without this weird ending. Overall, this one was one of my favorite books of the Spookathon. I really recommend it. If you're into like more dark, true crime kind of books, you will really enjoy this one. The next book that I read for the Spookathon was In a Dark, Dark Wood by Ruth Ware. I'm kind of disappointed because I wanted to like it as much as I've liked her other books that I have read, but this one was just very okay. This one follows the story of a girl who gets invited to a bachelorette party of a friend of hers that's getting married. However, she hasn't talked to this friend in like 10 years. So it's really confusing as to why she got invited. She and her other friend that she is still friends with, they both get invited and decide to go together. The party takes place during a weekend. It's in the middle of the woods. So you're kind of in a creepy setting. Some information ends up coming out about her friend, the bride, and how it affects her. We also flash forward in classic thriller fashion to the future where we find out that the main character is in the hospital and someone has died. And so we're flashing forward and flashing back to what happened, how the person died, what took place during this bachelorette party, why it got crazy. That's pretty much it. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't good. There was nothing about the characters that made me love or hate them. I just felt very neutral about everything. The setting, the characters, the plot. I think if you're a fan of Ruth Ware, I would still encourage you to try to pick this one up. It could have just been a wonky, like, me thing, but yeah, I don't know. It was fine. It was just fine. I don't know what else to say about this book. I really don't. The next book I read for Spookathon was another one that I DNF'd, and that was The Whisper Man. This is by Alex North. So this was the book that my friends Kaylin and Liv and Chandler and I tried to buddy read this month together, and we all read it. 2 of us finished it and 2 of us didn't. So very torn about this book. The majority of us didn't really enjoy it. This is another one that came out recently. It follows the story of the serial killer who whispers outside people's homes to lure their children outside and murder them, which sounds so creepy. And I was so here for that kind of story. But this is much more of a detective type story. So the Whisper Man guy is already in prison. You're following 2 different people. The detective who put away this Whisper Man, but now there's other murders happening that are similar, and so he's wondering if there's like an accomplice, there's like a copycat person. He's trying to work together with the Whisper Man to figure this out. And then we also follow the story of a dad whose son is being talked to, seemingly, and possibly going to be another victim of this copycat Whisper Man. It's hard for me to talk about because I only got about halfway through, but I was so bored. I was so bored. Had I known or been made aware that this was more of a detective type story, I think I maybe could have gotten through it or have just been like, that probably isn't for me. Those aren't my favorite type of books, so I just didn't like this. I thought it was going to be much more of a thriller. I didn't realize that the guy was already caught and that there was like a copycat thing going on. It wasn't thrilling. It was very much just like a story. I think there were times probably towards the end when it got thrilling, but as far as the first half of the book goes, I was so bored. I know a couple people in the comments of my vlog did really enjoy this one, so don't let my opinion deter you from picking this up, but this one just really wasn't for me. And then the last book that I read during the Spookathon I loved, and that was No Exit. This is by Taylor Adams. I'm still not over this book. It was crazy. I would say that this month, after reading The Turn of the Key and No Exit, like, the best thrillers. I love this book. This book follows our main character who is trying to drive home in the middle of the night to get to her mom who she just found out that she has cancer. So she's trying to drive home. She gets stuck in a snowstorm, and so she has to kind of pull off and find shelter in this rest stop until the storm sort of passes and they get some trucks to clear the roads. So she's in this rest stop with a couple of other strangers. And at one point she goes back out to her car to retrieve something, and while she's leaving her car, the van parked next to her, she notices that there is a little girl in a cage in the back of that van. Right? So she's now trying to figure out how she can save this little girl. Who out of all of the strangers to trust? Which one is the person that is doing this? It's crazy. Like, this was such a wild ride. This was so fast paced, so well done. So many twists that, like, I definitely did not see coming. I thought something was going to happen, but what I thought was going to happen did not happen, which I loved. So, oh my goodness, it did get a little gory towards the end, which I was not expecting, but that's okay. I think they're turning this one into a movie, which I am very excited for. I loved our main character. I thought that her character was so believable. The mix between wanting to fight and finding the strength within herself to figure out what to do and how to save this little girl, but while also being this art major college student who has no clue what she's doing. It just felt like relatable. Oh my gosh, that could have been me. I will say my only 2 critiques is that the last like 2 pages of the book I think were unnecessary. I think it could have ended at one specific point that I can't say and just have been done, and I would have been fine with that. So that's my first critique. And then the other one is that I didn't think that the little girl was all that believable. I think she was supposed to be like 7 years old, and she was just like saying and doing things that I don't think a 7-year-old girl in that situation would say or do. So that was a little distracting in my opinion. I was just kind of like, really? But honestly, the rest of the book, the crazy story, the twists, the characters, the situations that they found themselves in, the setting, so great, so well done. I love this one. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars as well. So those are all of the books that I read in the month of October. I think I actually read every single book that I set out to read on my TBR, which is crazy. That's never happened. I had a really, really great month of reading in October. I read some amazing thrillers. Overall, just a solid month of reading. You guys should let me know down in the comments below, what was the best book that you read in the month of October? I would love to know. Thank you so much for watching. I love you guys. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day wherever you are, and I'll talk to you soon in my next video. Bye!